I was 9 the night they took Lily Parker. Her family lived directly across from ours on West Waverly, white siding, a maple that left caramel leaves on the sidewalk each October. I had my father's telescope propped on a cheap aluminum tripod by my bedroom window, learning constellations from the star chart that came folded like a treasure map in the box. City glow made the heavens look bruised, you needed glass to peel the sky back. I leaned from the eyepiece for half a second and caught movement against Lily's side yard, something big and wrong-angled, crawling on all fours. At first I told myself it was a trick of shadow, the maple doing puppet work on the grass. Then it rose, just a little, and what I had filed under dog refused to fit. The thing was the size of a refrigerator tipped onto limbs. The skin swallowed moonlight like fresh asphalt. It moved with a quiet, hateful ease. Lily slept with her window cracked for the night breeze. I watched the thing slide one long arm through the sash, the glass bending with a squeal. Then the frame gave, and the arm pushed through as if the house were a soft thing you could wear. One motion, arm in, hinge break, girl out. Lily kicked at nothing and screamed. The sound put a cold needle through my teeth. I screamed too. For an instant the creature turned its head toward me. I couldn't read a face, only depths, the suggestion of blue where eyes should be, a mouth that held its teeth like a secret. My father shouldered through the door. I was half crying, half choking on words. He dialed police with one hand and pulled the telescope away from the glass with the other, as if the instrument had invited something in. Officers arrived fast enough to keep the sirens hot. They took down a description that made them patient and me small, large male, unknown. The rest, on all fours, arm through window, skin like midnight, fell between their boots. For a week the news ate itself on sorrow. The Parkers sat on couches and on front steps and in the same clothes, eyes swelling down to slits. Then the city got its second wound, Ava Ellis, lifted from her bedroom in almost the same way. The winter of 1990 slid into 1991 with a number you did not say loud, 7 girls taken from their rooms in our neighborhood. Playground rumors sharpened the details, closed caskets, mothers who fainted at the mortuary door. In March 91, the police announced they had found all 7 in the abandoned Early Steps Center on Henley Street, a squat brick building everyone called the old Head Start even after the sign came down. No suspect. No answers. My little brother Adam folded in on himself. He was 6 and carried the gentle seriousness of a new coin. Ava had been his girlfriend, kindergarten solemn, fingers laced on field trips. After the announcement, he put a country's worth of distance between himself and everyone. Doctors wrote prescriptions that sent him walking through the house as if it belonged to someone else. My father, a man who believed that problems surrendered to labor, hired Beth, a caretaker with the patience of worn pine. Then the city put a name on its fear, William Bill Sutter. Everyone knew Bill. He was huge, over 7 feet, and older than most of our parents, but with a child's mind. People said he'd been born with a disorder that grew his bones faster than his chances. His mother brought him to the swings after regular hours, so littles wouldn't stare or shove. I traded baseball cards with him. He liked bad bubblegum and any card with a catcher wearing too much gear. At trial, the prosecutor held up a shirt and a shoe, both with blood that matched Lily's type. DNA wasn't the judge it would later be. The jury heard, impossibly large man, and saw Bill's shoulders, heard blood type and saw the headlines, then came back guilty. The judge gave the sentence a town wanted to hear, death. I said the thing that lived in my lungs, the man who took Lily had been bigger than Bill, different than Bill, wrong in ways Bill wasn't. I had seen it. Adults nodded without listening. Classmates turned my name into a smear of nickname. Spooky stuck like gum to a shoe. I started to read my fear into categories, ghosts, monsters, serial killers, things with Latin names and blurry photographs. The library card got soft around the edges. The librarian started saying, back again, like we were talking about a movie I'd seen too often. By spring of 1994, my father packed us a mile away, a small migration that felt like an ocean. Adam left school entirely, wordless and quick to shove. The hospital wrote new prescriptions and then more, and the world got cotton-stuffed. Beth began to feel less like help and more like a wall we leaned against. What I kept from the old block were Sophie Price and Dante Jacobs. Sophie had been in the room when her twin, Aria, was pulled through the window, a detail the paper printed once and then folded into shame. She drew the dark man again and again in a spiral notebook, each page capturing some angle the others missed. Dante had lost his little sister too. Grief makes its own gravity. The three of us ended up at the same lunch table and the same library tables without scheduling it. We ate in the cafeteria's back corner where janitors stacked chairs for dances, and afterward we nested in a library bay that smelled like dictionary dust. Home was a place you passed through to sleep. The library was where we remembered how to speak. Early May, the sun lowering itself down the street like a coin into a pocket, Dante froze mid-step and touched my arm. "Spooky," he said, kindly, the way he said most things. "Look. There's a patch of trees on the corner by the blue house, a slice of city pretending at forest. It looked like it always did, until it didn't. A vertical slice of shadow detached and stood up. I misjudged the height, the chain-link fences nearby read 8 feet. The shadow had a head and shoulders above that. The light behind us made its edges burn. Dante moved first. He ran at it. The thing dropped to all fours and ran too, not away so much as through, straight into a narrow alley I had never seen, a scene the city had forgotten to stitch shut. We followed, because boys do, because disbelief is a kind of dare. The alley tightened us until our shoulders could have brushed both walls if we tried. At the far end, a stone wall rose 20 feet, with 2 flanking returns that made a 3-sided box. The last lip of sun sat on the wall like a hot coin. The thing stepped into that coin and let it outline him, skin that seemed to reflect nothing, eyes a deep blue, and a smile that opened like a drawstring bag full of small, sharp teeth. I realized the chase had the wrong subject. He hadn't been fleeing us. He'd been drawing us, thread through a needle. He came on in measured, polite steps, like a man giving you time to understand your mistake. He leaned down until his face filled my sight. His tongue, long, too smooth, came out and licked my cheek. There was a smell I've never been able to write down, wet quarry and pennies, a hint like bleach, too clean and rotten at the same time. He turned to Dante and sniffed. For a beat he went still, the way animals freeze at a scent that says do not eat. Then he put one foot on the stone and walked up as if the wall were a floor, vanished over the edge, and left us to decide what our legs were for. We ran. Beth handed us sodas and didn't ask a single question I couldn't answer. We talked ourselves into and out of sense. By the time my father came home, we were asleep on the carpet like dropped coats. At noon, we are brave. We went back while the sun stood overhead, believing it to be a guard. At the tree line, just beyond the first weeds, we found a mounded ring of dirt that hid a hole maybe 5.5 feet across. No ladder. No rungs. It breathed a cool damp air up our shins. We threw a rock. It clattered down, then made a polite splash. "Turn around," Dante told Sophie, and when she did he pissed into the hole like it was an altar. The sound said water at the bottom. The answer arrived as a bellow from below, followed by a scrape like a door too heavy for its hinge. We ran again, and when I glanced back from the sidewalk I saw a black arm and a paddle-wide hand rake the ground where we had been. We took the problem to the library, not the police. A child's unlearned logic. Adults hadn't believed us for 3 years, why would they begin now? I went back to the paranormal shelves, cryptids, folklore, clippings from the local history room. The language of monsters gave me just enough structure to stand upright. Closing time chased us outside. I found Sophie and Dante sharing headphones from her Walkman, 1 ear each, the wire a truce between them. The bus had stopped running. "Call your dad," I asked Sophie. He hates Dante, she said flatly. He'd rather call the cops and say I set a fire. Dante scratched his jaw. Kai will get us, he said, Kirill, his older cousin. We fed a quarter into the payphone, and 10 minutes later a station wagon pulled to the curb, primer showing under the paint like dried blood under a band-aid. Dante, Kai leaned over and peered past me, who's your girl? Dante flicked my shoulder. It's Spooky, he said. He is a he. Kai laughed and told me to ride up front. When I slung my backpack in, the flap fell and the pistol I had stolen from my father's cabinet flashed the interior light. Kai's mouth pulled left. You carrying, little man? Long story, I said. At his grandmother's house, he cracked the door and told Dante, show Grams your girl. I need a word with Spooky. We stayed in the idling car. So, he said, voice gentle, why a gun? I watched the porch light turn bugs into a ring of junk planets. You know why they call me Spooky? I asked. Because you talk ghosts, he said. Because, I said, I watched the thing that took your sister take Lily Parker. It wasn't Bill Sutter. Something mean and protective moved in his eyes. Don't put that ghost mess on Arya, he said, using the name his aunt couldn't say out loud. The state did what it did. I told him about the alley, the blue eyes, the tongue and the recoil, the wall walk, the arm like a shovel. When I finished, the humor had gone from his face. That sounds like a story Grams tells when the night gets teeth, he said finally. Eat first. Then we talk. Grams Miriam ran her kitchen like a small navy. Collard steamed in a pot with a ham bone. Chicken rested on a rack that winked grease. Cornbread cooled in a pan that had seen 3 generations of batter. She sniffed the air and fixed Kai with a look. Kirill Marcus Jacobs, she said, I smell smoke on you. Wash your hands before you touch God's food. I washed too, because some rules leap the bloodline. We ate until the talk slowed from hunger to sound. Sophie called her father from the hallway, lied with a calm that made me jealous, and came back with her shoulders untense. After dishes, Grams pointed at Kentucky, take the girl home. Then at Dante, shower. Pajamas. Bring yourself back down here. She didn't ask me to leave. What did you tell Kai that set his hair up, she said, back to me, both hands in the sink. I told her. Everything. Not the rumor version, not the clipped police version, alley, wall, hole, bellow, the all of it. She didn't smile or correct. She listened like the story had weight and she had arms for it. When Dante came down in plaid pants and a tee too small, Grams patted the couch. So you ran into him, she said. He nodded once. She unscrewed a small flask, took a sip with a face that said it burned, and began. When I was about Kai's age, folks were scared of the Russians turning the sky white. City said they'd build tunnels to fallout shelters. That early steps place used to be a little elementary. They put a shelter in the basement, ran a tunnel toward the 3rd Avenue depot. My husband Percy worked the crew. Came home with dirt in his eyelashes. Then the world remembered other ways to be afraid, and the city left the job half done. Percy started patching roads and the shelters kept breathing down there where no one listened. People forgot. Till they didn't. We told police for weeks that kids were missing. Back then, nobody of consequence cared about colored children going quiet. Then the mayor's daughter went missing. Then 2 other white kids the same weekend. Suddenly the city knew our streets again. A mother said she saw a tall black man run toward the school. They turned the school inside out and found nothing. Then they went downstairs. Basement door to the tunnels was open like somebody had said it that way. Less than an hour later they had pulled in every badge wearing a belt. 15 children in that shelter. Torn. One still breathing. She pointed into the tunnel and died pointing. No one spoke. The fridge hummed like a tired bee. They did what scared men do, Graham said, voice flattening. They wrote up every black man they could pin to a wall. Settled on Alton Pierce. Slow man. Janitor at the school. Trial like a bus ride. Hanged by Friday. Beatrice Sloan, her little girl taken, stood on the courthouse steps and hollered that Alton was innocent, said the man she saw was black as pitch, not brown like Alton. They called her hysterical and put her in a sanitarium until she worked herself smaller and her people tucked her into Spring Haven. Folks say she sits at a window and lets the world pass like a parade she didn't buy tickets for. I swallowed a question that scratched on the way down. How does that help us? Because the story didn't end there, Graham said. About 10 years later, children went missing again. We knew the police would do what they did, either nothing or the wrong thing, so we watched our own. Kai's mama was 5 or 6. Percy and James, my oldest, sat by the window with a shotgun like a metronome. That thing looked like a shadow till it didn't. James fired into its chest. It screamed like something metal getting bent, and still it reached. It threw James across the room. Percy reloaded and planted buckshot in its face. It howled and jumped out into the dark. And we learned its taste, she went on, softer. Jesse, Ethel's boy, was sweet as angel food. Mabel, Kai's mama, could set a preacher's teeth on edge. Ethel told me 2 twins lay in the same bed when it came. It took one and left the other. The one left had been caught stealing from her mama's purse that morning. She said it sniffed the girl and looked away, like she was spoiled meat. You listening close, she said to both of us. It takes the good ones. That's the wrongest thing I know about the world. It eats good children first. Dante's eyes shined at the corners. So, we should be bad. Graham squeezed his hand. Be good, baby. But do one small bad thing now and then so the devil gets confused and walks past your door. It should have been a joke. It was a rule. The next morning I took Graham's story and turned it into a plan only a child would think could work. I tucked a Bible under my arm and walked into Spring Haven with the air of a junior deacon. The receptionist glanced at the book and smiled me through. I stopped at 3 rooms along the corridor to talk about Jesus in a respectful murmur so I wouldn't look like a boy with a single destination. A name plaque halfway down the second hall read Beatrice Sloan. She sat in a thin chair, body angled to the window, face also angled, as if the bones had made a decision long ago and the flesh had learned to go along. Mrs. Sloan, I said, sitting in the unoccupied chair. My name is Micah Cole. By then, even my real name sounded borrowed. Spooky had become the one I turned my head to. She did not move. I know this is strange, I said, but I have a question about the thing that took your daughter. Her eyes moved before her face did. When she turned, it was slow and precise, as if the room might punish any sudden intention. Did it have blue eyes? I asked, the words heavy as coins I shouldn't spend. Her mouth understood before the rest of her. Its teeth were like knives, she said, so quiet the air had to lean close to hear. How did you ever get close enough to see, boy? I told her about the alley and the tongue and the way it had backed off like it had smelled a chemical on Dante. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cold and quick. How did you get out alive when my baby died? She hissed. What makes you so special? I had nothing to give her except the thing Grams had said that ached to say out loud, it takes good kids. I did not say it. She rose with a speed that should have been beyond her and raked my forehead with her nails. Blood ran into my left eye. Orderlies came in fast and peeled me away from her. If it won't kill you, she screamed, voice ripping itself, I will. My father drove me home with paper triangles taped to my brow and a story I recited like liturgy. I had come to minister, an elderly woman had confused me for someone else, it was nobody's fault. He didn't call me a liar. He also didn't ask for the part one hadn't said. At school the next morning, Dante touched the stitches with his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "Fought a high schooler," I said. He snorted. "And I kissed Cindy Crawford last night." We laughed, the kind you do when you have to breathe somewhere. The bus turned onto my street and stopped. Police cars pulsed blue-white down the block. The driver took an alternate route around the barricade and let us off early, the three of us, me, Dante, Sophie, getting smaller and smaller as we walked toward my house. The window to Adam's room was gone. Glass clung to the sash like crumbs. Beth sat in the ambulance, palms and cheeks webbed with bandage where she'd fought the glass. My father stood in the yard issuing instructions until he saw me, then he was just a father, hands on my shoulders, then a hug so hard it reminded my ribs how small I had been in kindergarten. "We're going to find him," he said, and the sentence fell apart in the middle. No officer asked why I went inside. I dumped my backpack and refilled it, road flares, flashlight, batteries, the pistol and a spare magazine, the weight solid against my lower back. Outside, I walked straight to the nearest uniform. "You know where he is," I said. "The early steps basement. Just go." "Watch your mouth, kiddo," he said without looking at me. "Fuck you," I said, and left him to discover whether he could hear that with all the radios squawking. Dante and Sophie fell into step. "Where?" Dante asked, even though the three of us were already pointed there. "It didn't eat him," I said. "It took him to punish us." The sentence was a kind of spell. It let me move. The old preschool yawns the same, no matter what decade you walk into it. Windows broken, doors boarded and then unboarded, weeds talking to each other in cracks. Sophie took the flashlight. I kept the gun. The smell hit us at the threshold, sewer and wet rot. We found the stairs down without thinking. In the basement, a rust-scalped iron door lay flat, hinges ripped out like teeth. Beyond it, a tunnel opened like a throat. From somewhere ahead came a whimper so thin it made me think of light seen through rain. "Adam," I said. Sound died on concrete and came back smaller. Sophie swung the beam up and caught a pair of legs dangling high, pant legs dark, sneakers dirty. The ceiling had cracked and a length of rebar had bent down. Adam was hung on it, the metal through the meat of his calf. He didn't see us. He made a sound as if crying in a language no one had taught him. "Go for help," I told Sophie. She turned and froze. The thing crouched where the tunnel pinched, slick with something clear and wrong, head bent to fit, arms like the first draft of a spider. It smiled. Dante cracked a flare and set it hissing behind us. Red light made the tunnel look like a throat we had slid too far down. I lifted the pistol and emptied the magazine into its chest. The sound punished us, our ears stopped working as if they had decided to quit their jobs. The creature shook off the rounds like gnats in summer. It caught Sophie by the face with one hand and swung her like a club into my ribs. I went down and stayed down, breath gone to find someplace quieter. Dante jammed the burning flare into the thing's arm. The skin sizzled. It punched him once, a clean, thoughtless motion, and Dante folded, his body deciding not to be a container anymore. The creature laughed, a low, familiar baritone played through gravel. "There's no such thing as heroes, kid," it said. It dragged Sophie deeper into the tunnel, laughter shrinking with the distance. The flare burned down to a fist of light and died. The flashlight dimmed until the room became a guess. Adam whimpered until he didn't. I lay there with my body refusing orders. At some point the darkness put a hand on me and I slept or passed or left. They say I was gone about 24 hours. When the door frame blinked into being again, it was square and white and full of helmets. The light on a rescuer's shoulder cut the darkness like a zipper. Voices arrived as if from the bottom of a pool, muffled, patient, trying not to frighten a skittish animal. Someone said, "Two. We've got two." Another voice said, "Kid's alive." Then the rush happened in choreographed pieces, a board under my back, straps, the sensation of being a book slid into a sleeve. Hands reached up and lifted Adam off the rebar with a noise I hope to forget, a wet cork pulled the wrong way. I tried to speak his name and produced nothing the room could use. The tunnel mouth filled with people and then with air. I remember the orange glow of a flare relit by a gloved hand. I remember a man saying, "Where does this go?" and another saying, "We're not going today." When I woke enough to understand walls, the walls belonged to a hospital. Plaster cast swallowed me from ankles to ribs, from wrists to shoulders. My body had been mapped and redrafted while I was away. Beth sat in a vinyl chair beneath a poster about hand washing, a band-aid crosshatching her cheek. My father had a nap folded into his face. "Micah," he said when he realized I was looking back at him. He tried to keep his voice steady and failed. "You're here, Adam?" I asked. His mouth worked and then found honesty. "He's alive," he said first, "because that is where you always start. He's going to need time." Later, when time wasn't listening, I learned what, alive, had cost my brother, a leg that would not forgive, a world that never quite returned to the brightness it had promised him. A detective came. He asked for the story the way a dentist asks for your mouth, open, wide, don't bite. I gave him what I could in pieces. He wrote more than the officers had written on the night of Lily's window. He wrote, "Large male suspect." He wrote, "Bold head start." He did not write blue eyes or tongue. He did not write laughter that sounded like a famous actor run through a gravel sack. You cannot put your nightmare's voice on official paper. "Sophie Price," I said, when I had enough breath to outrun the morphine. "They took Sophie." "We're looking," he said. Adults always said it that way. Not, "We will find her," because that invited the wrong gods. Just, "We're looking," a phrase that could be said forever. When he left, my father set his chair close. "We move when you can walk," he said. His voice had already packed. "Will Dante's grandma be at the funeral?" I asked. My father closed his eyes like he was counting backward. "We'll do what we can," he said. They found Dante quickly, because they were looking for him in a place where the world still had a name. They didn't find Sophie. The news replayed the Head Start photo, squat brick, the weeds doing the same work they had done 10 years earlier, and said words that had been spoken before, senseless, heinous, community in shock. Someone from the city said, "We are working to seal these unsafe structures," as if the walls were the danger and not what listened behind them. They poured concrete like it could bless a wound. Trucks came with their rotating drums and nurses of cement guided the gray spill into the open throat. The basement filled by inches, by hours, until workers could stand where darkness had won arguments for decades. A man with a clipboard drew a square and wrote "safe" in the margin. At the memorial for Dante Jacobs, the church doors wore crepe like old ladies. Kirill sat forward in the front pew as if he could will some part of his cousin back. Graham's Miriam walked in on Kai's arm, her spine straight, her mouth set to a position that asked the room to mind itself. I could not go inside, the plaster and the chair and the doctor's plans kept me anchored. People told me how the preacher said bright light, how he said good boy, how he said God's hands, as if the phrases could knit. They did not hold a service for Sophie because there is a particular cruelty to not having a body. The present tense hangs around your door like a stray dog you can't quite kick. Missing is a tense that ruins other tenses. Reporters put old pictures on the screen of Bill Sutter walking into court in handcuffs years earlier, a giant stooping to fit a doorway. Questions remain, one anchor said, with the tone of someone who will go home and slip off her shoes. But tonight, a community seeks healing. I lay in the hospital bed and counted my breaths like a method. When I lost count, I started again. On the TV, a city worker said they had closed the tunnel at early steps once and for all. Under the closed captioning, my brother's name scrolled with a fundraiser date for his rehabilitation, set in a school gym that smelled like wax and whistles. We moved when the calendar said I was allowed to use my legs. A mile on a map can rescue you. In a heart it is the same town, a different corner to look out from. Adam learned to pilot the new route his body had laid down. He came home with a cane and eyes that made you feel like you were too loud even when you weren't. The doctors gave names to things that did not need names: trauma response, depressive effect, pain management, and Beth learned a new list of instructions with the patience of a nun. My father tried to make the house understand order again. He put tools back where tools went. He folded the mail into a basket by the door. He said grace longer at dinner, like he could pry open a small window in the sky and slide our names through it. At night the house made a sound I hadn't noticed at the old address, the breathing of wood cooling and expanding, the small knocks of plumbing asking to be remembered. Each sound woke me. Sleep became a room I rented by the hour. I brought the telescope out once, because the stars know nothing about basements. Its smooth cylinder looked wrong in my hands. I set it on the sill and watched my own yard instead, the squares of lawn lit by the street lamp, the maple once again pretending to be ordinary. When a cat passed, my heart tried to leave the county. Kirill came by one afternoon in a t-shirt from a gas station, the kind with a wolf howling at a moon that didn't belong to anyone. He stood in the door like he had learned to ask a house's permission. "How's Adam?" he asked first, because even grief is polite where I live. "Working at it," I said. "How's Grams?" He looked down at his shoes as if the laces might give him a better answer. "She says the city can pour rocks on a mouth, but you still hear breathing if you put your ear there. She says the 10-year clock doesn't care about cement." We sat on the steps and passed silence back and forth. "Dante would have hated you in that cast," Kai said after a while. "He would have drawn on it. He would have written Cindy Crawford across your chest and then had to explain it to Beth." The laugh came out of me before sadness could veto it. For a moment, it was a good sound in our yard. "Grams told me to tell you," he said, business tone now, what she told me after my first real fight. "Do one thing wrong every day. Small. Stupid. Enough to trip a superstition. It ain't theology. It's just lock-picking." "I know," I said. "She already commissioned me." Kai nodded. "Then consider this one for today," he said, reached over, and flicked my ear hard enough to sting. "Ow," I said. He grinned. "You swore in your head," he said. "Counts." When he left, the house felt less like a container and more like a place again. The city settled. The papers found other fires to fold. A decade is the perfect length for forgetting what you promised at a microphone. The first time I felt the clock in my bones I was in line at a grocery store, a plastic basket on my forearm like a blood pressure cuff. A tabloid near the register ran an old photo of the early steps building with a headline that weaponized nostalgia, "Remember when?" Another paper, reputable enough to not embarrass itself, ran a small story on page 3 about a missing child on the other side of town. It was late autumn, and the sky had the color of old metal. I put the paper back so carefully the rack didn't move. By winter, there were 3 names. A radio caller said the city needed more streetlights. Another said we needed more jobs. No one on the radio said tunnels. People don't like to say words that make the ground feel thin under their shoes. I went to the gym where they'd put the fundraiser for Adam months earlier and listened to parents talk at tables covered in disposable tablecloths. "The police are doing everything," one father said, because that sentence has the right number of syllables to fit between panic and sleep. A mother with a church fan in her hand said, "My baby is good," and then folded the fan until it snapped. I did not go back to the old block. I practiced cowardice like a dentist practices gentleness. Courage gets too many boys killed. The 10-year cycle did what cycles do, it insisted. Missing posters looked back at you from laundromats and bus stops. In the spring the city formed a task force, which is Latin for, "Men will now meet together." They said they were talking to experts. They did not say what kind. On a Saturday in May, almost to the week when Dante and Sophie and I had followed a shadow into a seam in the city, news vans returned to Henley Street. The shots on TV looked like they had been saved from a previous decade and color-corrected. A now grayer city official pointed at a concrete slab and said, "We have done everything structurally possible." I turned the TV off and stood in the kitchen listening to the refrigerator complain about cold. If there is any salvation in a story like this, it is domesticated in small habits. I learned to check windows twice. I learned to leave a night light on in hallways not because it sent a message to something in the dark, but because it sent a message to me: we are not hiding. I cleaned the telescope, put it away, took it out, and leaned the case against a wall like an apology. When I was old enough to be dumb with courage again, I went back to Spring Haven with a card for Beatrice Sloane. The receptionist was new, or pretended to be, and asked me to sign a book. I wrote my name large enough to feel like it belonged to me. Beatrice's room had new curtains patterned with small flowers that had never seen dirt. "Mrs. Sloane," I said at the doorway, and then stopped. The chair by the window was empty. An aide passing behind me said, "She passed last week," as if we were talking about weather. I put the card in a trash can by the elevator because the ritual wanted somewhere to die. Back home, Adam and I came to an arrangement that did not look like two brothers in a movie but worked better than pretending. He let me sit while he oiled the hinge on his bedroom door for the third time in as many months. I let him teach me that a person can hold a screw steady with fingers that don't want to be steady and still get the job done. We did one wrong thing here and there, small as crumbs. He told Beth he had taken a pill when he hadn't, and I nodded like a co-conspirator. I told my father I had filled the gas can and hadn't, then drove it back the next morning to make the lie a truth that had been late. We were not pushing back against theology. We were building a fence of splinters around our skin. I wish I could tell you it worked because we were clever. It worked because the world is cruel in patterns and kind at random. Or because Grams had learned something you can't write down and we were repeating it like a song you hum without knowing the words. Time does not heal, it layers. If you look quickly from far enough away, a wound looks like wood grain. We moved again when my father retired and decided a different state would teach his lungs a new way to breathe. I brought the telescope and a shoebox of baseball cards that still smelled like the gum Bill Sutter used to hate. The rest of my childhood basement stayed behind in a house I hope was kind to the family that bought it. I worked where people let me, the way boys who have learned to watch do, security cameras, midnight shifts, pairing alertness with boredom until the two married and gave me a paycheck. I met someone who liked that I listened when rooms spoke. We married in a building that used to be a bank and let our vows echo off vault doors that remembered other promises. We had kids and gave them names that wouldn't embarrass them in a roll call. I told them stories that had nothing to do with tunnels. I told them about constellations, about maple helicopters spinning from trees, about how bats are good and moths are just butterflies that work nights. When they were old enough for rules to stick, I told them the wrong rule with my whole mouth: do one small bad thing each day. They laughed because they thought I was kidding. Then they snuck an extra cookie, and I let it pass. When the younger one asked why, I said, because perfect is a dangerous word. When the older one asked, is that a religion? I said, it's a habit. My wife raised one eyebrow in a question that held a decade of marriage in it. I told her as much of the truth as I could without turning the air colder. She squeezed my hand across the kitchen table. We'll keep them, she said, as if keeping were a thing you could decide and then simply do. Last year, almost to the month, I walked into the living room and the news had parked itself there without permission. A drone shot of Henley Street drifted across the TV. The camera paused over concrete that had been poured decades ago and grown old enough to crack like a heel. A reporter said they were renovating the old Early Steps lot for affordable housing, the way cities tell themselves they are making amends. A city official in a hard hat pointed with the flat of his hand. No voids, he said. We have tested for voids. The word sounded ridiculous and correct at once. The report cut to a mother holding a photo on a porch 2 zip codes away. The photo paper had the curl of something handled more than loved. "My boy is good," she said to the microphone. I turned the TV off because I could hear the line that would come next if I let it, "We're looking." That night, after the dishwasher coughed to a clean stop, I took the telescope out. Old aluminum legs clicked into place with the familiar small fight. I set it by the window and looked at the yard first because that is what you do when you have a past, you ensure the present is quiet. Then I tipped the glass up to the sky because memory is allowed to take a night off. A shape moved where movement shouldn't be. At the hedge line, something taller than the fence took one step, then another, polite as a dinner guest, and paused with its head just where the streetlight ended. I did not breathe. Blue found me from across the dark, the color of a deep lake you know is cold. The smile I remember unstitched the night. The porch door across the street opened. A neighbor stepped out to call a cat home. The shape tilted its head, listening, then turned and walked along the fence the way a sentence finds its period. I set the telescope down and put my hand flat on the sill the way you comfort a nervous horse. For a week after that hedgeline sighting, I slept like a guard dog in a thunderstorm, alert but useless. I kept telling myself I'd imagined the blue, that some part of my brain had projected a childhood shape onto a grown man's shadow. But imagination doesn't make the house quieter. It makes it learn new noises. 2 mornings later, the city poured back into my life with a newspaper headline, "Foundation work halted on Henley Street." The early steps lot had coughed up a surprise, nothing grand enough for the front page, but a paragraph that made my skin go cold. Surveyors identified voids beneath the slab, crews found a narrow culvert extending beyond the recorded footprint. Work paused pending inspection. Voids. The word sounded like a throat clearing. I folded the paper with a care I usually reserve for maps and handed it to my wife. She is practical, she makes lists that take loneliness out of a day, and she read without blinking. "You don't have to go," she said, "the way you tell someone both halves of a truth. I won't stop you, I wish you wouldn't." "I won't go alone," I said, which in our house is permission shaped like reassurance. That evening, when the kids had homework that looked like schematics and the dishwasher had started its watery rosary, I called Kirill. He picked up on the second ring, voice exactly the same as when we were children in Borrowed Courage. "You saw the article," I said. "Grams called me before the ink was dry," he said. "Said the city found a throat and now they're arguing if the sound is wind or breathing." "How is she?" I asked. He let out air slow. "She's tired in a way that sleep won't fix. She wants to see you." "When?" I asked. "Tonight," he said. "Before we go look at a hole and tell each other it's only dirt." Graham's Miriam had become smaller the way a great tree becomes a stump and still insists on being the center of a yard. She sat in her living room under family photographs that knew how to keep a face lit even when a house had gotten dim. She studied me like an X-ray. "You saw him," she said. Not a question. "I saw something," I said. "Something that knows your name," she said back. I wanted to ask how she knew. Instead I nodded and sat. She patted the couch. "Come closer. My bones don't let me raise my voice like they used to." When I had leaned in, she took my hand and pressed something metal into my palm, a small compass, its brass worn to a dull worm by years in a pocket. "Percy carried this," she said. "When he worked that tunnel under the school. Little thing kept him from getting turned around when the lantern breath went thin. Men get lost in straight lines when they're afraid. Did you know that? A compass gives your feet a reason." "It's beautiful," I said. "It's stubborn, not beautiful," she said. "Like a grandmother." I slipped the case open. The needle wobbled and then found itself. Grams watched my face settle. "Micah," she said, "I've told boys lies that were good for them and truths that were bad. This I'm going to tell you is both. That thing smells the world different than we do. It sniffs out a kind of goodness that feels like sugar to it. Polite children. Careful children. Children who hold their breath at the right spots when a hymn says to. It ain't fair. Don't try to make it fair. Try to make it through. I've taught mine the rule, I said. One small wrong every day. She nodded. And you tell them why? I tell them perfect is a bad word, I said. I tell them a little wrong is like mud on a boot. You tell them enough, she said. The rest is yours. Now go look at that hole and tell me if the city poured amnesia or cement. We hugged in the old style, arms above the shoulders, no apology in it. On the way out, Kai handed me a flashlight I recognized from his trunk. We've been swapping gear so long that our toolkits are a family. She still drinks from the flask? I asked when we reached the sidewalk. He grinned. She quit carrying it, he said. Says she wants to meet Percy with clear eyes. The early steps lot looks wrong at night the way a missing tooth looks wrong in a smile. Work lights had been set along the chain link, making shadows of the fence diamonds. The slab itself bore cuts where a saw had gone through, neat rectangles of obedience. Near the rear corner, the concrete had been opened, a surgeon's work tidy enough to make you think this was all under control. We slipped through a panel the crews had left half-latched. The air had a basement temperature to it, a cool that didn't care about weather. Voids, Kai said under his breath, as if the word might hear its own name and come running. We reached the cutout and peered down. Someone had dropped a ladder through, the segmented kind that firefighters dream about. I shined the flashlight. The beam found brick with the sweat of decades on it. The saw had opened onto the old basement wall. Somebody got curious, Kai said. Or maybe they got honest. We descended like men who swear staircases into existence. At the bottom, my flashlight revealed what the report had refused to name. The iron door from my childhood lay in two pieces, rust curled like baked bread along the edges. Behind it, the tunnel mouth waited, exactly the shape my nightmares had promised and exactly as wrong. North, I whispered, opening the compass Grams had given me. The needle steadied, gave us direction when the architecture tried to convince us we'd invented it. We stepped inside. Sound changes in a tunnel. It moves forward and backward at once, like you're hearing yourself in a hallway of mirrors. The air changed too, picked up the taste of old water and something animal that had learned patience. I kept the light on the center of the path, resisting the urge to show my beam the walls. Light on walls makes a tunnel smaller, and I needed to believe in size. Missing kids, Kai said, voice low but unapologetic. You think they made it this far? Somebody brought them this far, I said. We walked 100 steps, then 200. The tunnel curved, enough to let a thing memorize a turn and use it for a trick later. I saw it before my brain got loud, a rebar strand bent down from a fissure in the ceiling, twin to the one that had turned Adam into a piece of the room. My light made the metal gleam like a wet tooth. Kai stopped. I heard him breathe like a man reminding himself his lungs worked. It remembers us, I said. He nodded and then pointed past the rebar with his chin. The tunnel widened. The floor offered a platform of dry concrete like a tongue. On it, a pile of things that looked random found a pattern: shoes, hair ties, the plastic beads you click into little braids, a ball cap with a team logo that didn't win enough games. At the edge of the pile, a photograph had escaped the stack and faced us with the stubbornness of paper. A girl in a church dress smiled at the camera like someone had asked nicely. Kai's hand tightened on my shoulder. I took a breath shallow enough not to disturb dust. Why did you come back? A voice asked, the kind of voice you hear when you put your ear to an old radio and turn the dial between stations. We turned. The light found skin that swallowed it. Blue blinked. The smile opened like a drawer. It's not your day, the voice said. Amusement turned low. It took one polite step forward and then another, the way a host moves toward guests he has already decided to hate. My hand found Kai's sleeve. I felt him steady on the other end of the grip. "It's been 10 years, I said, and heard the stupidity of the sentence. The thing already knew better than calendars. It tilted its head as if hearing a tune through concrete. "You bring sweetness with you," it said, inhaling. "You always do." Kai exhaled like a prayer turned sideways. "Not tonight," he said, and for a second I saw us as children again, in a car in front of his grandma's house, passing a cigarette like a secret and deciding we had a job. I took the compass from my pocket and flipped it open. The needle swung, found itself, and then, this is the part my rational brain wants to edit, quivered as if it had smelled something too. I put it in my mouth and bit down hard enough to snap the lip of my tongue, let the metallic shock flood my taste, then spat the blood onto my palm. It felt stupid. It felt like church and dare at once. I wiped the blood across my cheek. Kai looked at me for a half-beat and copied me, scarlet bright on his skin. The thing took another breath, then stopped the way it had in the alley, recoiled from a scent only it could read. "Rot," it said, almost with disappointment. "Mud on our boots," I said. "Stolen cookie. Lie told to a father. Wrong thing stacked small." It smiled wider, something like approval hiding under the disdain. "It makes you live ugly," it said. "I make you die clean." "I'd rather live ugly," Kai said. He flicked his flashlight beam past the thing, along the tunnel wall. Light hit a stencil of white paint my beam had missed, a block letter mark with a date stamp. Someone had left surveyor math on the wall in the last week, an arrow, a note that said room B with an arrow pointing left where the tunnel kinked a second time. I understood then, the city had not only found the tunnel, they'd measured it. The crews had walked in like men who had not learned a childhood rule and come back out because concrete believes in rules too. The creature took another testing step and then stepped back. It made an irritated sound in its throat and then did what I had seen it do twice before. It put a foot on the wall and walked upward, into the curvature of the tunnel, out of our plane, like it had remembered it was not a character in our geometry. "Go home, boy," it said as it melted into the dark. "You'll never be sweet enough for me." The sound of it leaving isn't a thing a recorder could capture. Its absence given a tone. I counted in my head to 20 because I needed a ritual. Kai counted with me, his lips moving, the numbers a ladder. "Room B," he said when we finished. "If there's a letter B." "There's a letter A," I said. We didn't follow. We aren't heroes. The rule is ugly. Stay alive, do the small wrongs, save the big braves for when the world does not have teeth. We backed out. We climbed the ladder. Night made a sound like a map folding. Telling children the truth is like setting a table in an earthquake. You do it as if plates will stay where you set them. We sat on the living room rug with the telescope case serving as a coffee table. The kids watched my face the way you watch a narrator when you're trying to find the lie you hope he's telling. "There are stories," I began. "Some of them are ours. Some of them we just carry for a while. I'm going to give you one that you don't have to believe. Faith is optional, but you have to keep." "Is this the cookie speech?" my older asked, grinning. "It's the cookie speech," I said, and they both groaned in mock pain because repetition is a family sport. One wrong thing each day. Small. Stupid. Safe. Enough to make you imperfect on purpose. Not because perfect is bad, your mother is practically perfect and I recommend it, but because there is a thing in this world that hunts sweetness. It's real enough that you don't need to see it to act like it is. My younger frowned. "Like alligators in sewers?" they asked. "Exactly like alligators in sewers," I said, and my wife shot me a look that said help and thank you in one eyebrow. "What's your wrong thing today?" my older asked, playing along with the ritual that used to be a joke and had become a liturgy. "I told your mother the gas can was full," I said. "It wasn't. I ate 2 grapes at the store," the younger confessed. "Before we paid. I left a dish in the sink," the older said solemnly. With cheese on it. We nodded like conspirators in a movie. It was a play. It was a spell. It was what we had. Later, after bedtime stole their noise, my wife and I did the part married people do when the world has asked them to be priests. We sat too close and held hands like we were last off the boat. I told her more than I'd told in years. I gave her alley and blue and tongue and rebar and laugh and the stupid bravery of blood on a cheek. She listened without flinching. In this house, that is love's most honest shape. We'll keep them, she said again, jaw set. We'll keep them ugly and alive. Grams died on a day that had the decency to be gray. We gathered at her house not because there was anything to do, Kai had done most of it before anyone thought to ask, but because people need to learn how to sit in a room where a voice used to be. We carried chairs out to the porch and let stories sort themselves. Percy came alive in the telling, a man with dirt in his eyelashes and a laugh you could trust. Dante came and set his elbows on our knees the way boys do when they need to throw their weight somewhere kind. Sophie came and stood in the driveway, half turned away, the way missing does, and we invited her in with sentences that had no verbs. When the food had surrendered and the paper plates had lost all dignity, Kai stood and cleared his throat. Grams left things, he said. She always leaves things. He held up a small notebook, the kind barbershop bookies used before apps. This is her watch list, not the police kind. The church kind. He flipped it open. The pages were a tidy grid of dates and names, annotated with notations in a code only a grandmother could love, little X marks, check marks, circles around numbers. Every 10 years, he said. And when she could feel the clock, she wrote prayers. He tore a page carefully and handed it to me. The handwriting was steady and very Miriam. For the children whose names I do not know. Make them stumble once a day. Let them track in mud. Let their lies be small and their mouths full of cookies they did not pay for. Let the devil pass them by because he is bored. Let them grow old and be good by accident. I laughed, then cried because laughing had become an old man's trick to hide the cry. Come with me, Kai said softly when the room had given us enough to travel on. We walked to Henley Street, the long way, because grief prefers a detour. The lot had been fenced anew, bright warning flags flapping like cheap prayers. At the corner of the slab, someone had already bolted a sign, future site of Henley Gardens. The letters pretended a garden could be grown out of a sealed mouth. Kai pulled a Sharpie from his pocket. Of course he did, he has always been a man who carries pens like talismans. He wrote on the sign's white edge in little letters only we would see if we ever came back. Miriam says do one bad thing. Vandalism, I said. Small. Stupid. Counts, he said. We stood, two middle-aged men in a lot that had eaten boys, and said a prayer that wasn't a prayer out loud. It sounded like silence with breathing in it. Night lets you borrow the house back. After the kids were asleep and my wife had fallen into the kind of rest that makes you jealous, I took the telescope out again. It is older than some of my fears now and steadier. I aimed it at the hedgeline because old habits are more honest than courage. Some part of me expected a shape to obligingly step into the ring of the streetlight because that is what a story would do. The hedge stayed a hedge. A cat did cat things. The neighbor's porch light went off and then on again as if indecisive. So I tipped the scope to the sky and let it find stars I barely remember the names of. The eyepiece framed a cluster like an idea taken too far. I thought of Lily and Ava, of Sophie whose tense refuses to settle, of Dante whose laugh still knocks around in rooms I'm not ready to clean. I thought of Adam asleep down the hall, of the cane leaned against his bed like a faithful dog. I thought of Grams's compass, now on the windowsill, needle resting as if it had finally decided north was an agreement rather than a rule. A sound came from the yard. Not a scrape. Not the geometry-defying click of wall walking. A giggle. Then a whisper, my kids, creeping down the hall, inventing rule-breaking they could do indoors. I turned and found them barefoot, hands in a cookie jar they believed made less noise at midnight. We froze like deer until the oldest shoved a cookie into the younger's mouth and then into their own. Crumbs dusted the floor like a blessing. "I see nothing," I said, looking back into the telescope, my voice neutral enough to convince the room it had been mistaken. They scampered back toward their beds, the younger whispering, "Does this count?" and the older whispering, "It counts so much." I watched the window glass reflect a little of our living room back at me, two small ghosts with chocolate mouths and a man with a lens to his eye, and beyond that, the stubborn night sky doing its best impression of order. There's a thing in the world that eats the good ones. There's a rule we've made to teach our children to leave mud on their goodness so it doesn't shine in a hunter's nose. There's a compass on my sill and a map in my head and a telescope that can't see underground but can keep my hands from shaking. Sometimes I still feel watched from the backyard. Sometimes I think I smell pennies and quarry and something too clean to be alive. But the house breathes, and the kids laugh from rooms we built for them, and the night lets me keep the pieces. If the blue ever finds my window again, I will do what I've learned to do. I will watch without inviting, I will teach without explaining, I will love in a way that leaves fingerprints. And in the morning, when a small voice says, "I lied about my homework," I will say, "Good," and mean it, and hand over a glass of milk and a napkin, and think of a tunnel that keeps trying to be a road, and of a woman who taught me to stumble on purpose, and of the fact that sometimes the ugliest strategies are the ones that keep the living alive. The telescope clicks softly when you turn it. It sounds like a lock deciding which way to trust. This is Netherloom. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next video.